Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about this one. So this is Wicca Nature Magic by Lisa Chamberlain. Now initially she had all of her books self-published and then a publishing house picked her up at some point. I haven't gone on like a deep dive for this author, but with that in mind, they decided to change the title of this book, and honestly I think her original title was better suited for this book because I and my husband both agreed Nature Magic makes it feel like it's going to be more similar to like Cunningham's book of like Earth, Air, Fire, Water or Earth Power or something like that, where it has more than just like one element. And the original title for this was like Wicca Tree Magic, and that's what the book is about. Sometimes the authors actually do pick better names for their books than the publishing houses, and that was definitely the case. Because of course, when I do my book reviews, I read every single page, which includes the publication page. And so it says that initially when she had self-published it, it was called that. And I feel like that title is better. And that is one of my biggest drawbacks because the new title just isn't it. Because it says Beginner's Guide to Working with Nature Spellcraft, nature in my mind would include working with rivers and stones and crystals and like outside and like herbs and a lot. There's a lot that you can include in that. And this is a book of trees. There's a teensy bit on flower magic, but it is really small. Honestly, I think the essential oils book had more information on flowers in a way than this because a lot of the essential oils came from like flowery kind of plants. And like the flowers in here are not really the highlight of the book. It's like a one-off little like section. The majority of the book, the spells, everything in here is about trees. That's not a bad thing, but it is something that I feel like the publishing house messed up. They should have used the original title because it was a better title. And so that's one of my biggest issues with the book, which, I mean, honestly, like I mentioned in the last book, I was really nervous getting into Lisa Chamberlain because at the time that I first heard of her, she was hitting #1 on Amazon anytime you'd look up any witchy books. She was always the sponsored list, and that can sometimes be like the author's paying to make sure you see their content. And with self-published authors, especially in the witchcraft community, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. And sometimes when you're really popular, you have to question, is it good content or is it sponsored content? And they're paying you to see it and paying people to give good reviews so that it continues to get bumped by Amazon. It's just one of those things in the market. And so I was just kind of hesitant. I'd heard some things about her. Honestly, at this point, I am really enjoying her books, and I'm glad to say that my assumptions of things I had heard about her are wrong. I mean, I haven't done a deep dive, but the way it's written, it does sound like it's a real person and not a ghostwriter. And sometimes with ghostwriters, it can be one person or it can be multiple people under that name. And I don't think it is anymore. I think Lisa Chamberlain is like a legit person. I could be wrong, but it just seems like it's not the same vibe as some of the ghost-written authors, you know? All that said, this is a book on tree magic. So a lot of the trees that she talks about, personally, I'm not huge into tree magic, and there was very few that I would personally like use because we don't really have a lot of those. And like the last book from her, there is information that I didn't know, and it's not like it's terribly hard to come across information, especially in the internet age, but like this book just presents the information in such an approachable way, and like she's just a good author. And so even though I don't really care about tree magic, and I was hoping the nature magic part of it would be a little bit more inclusive of other things, not just trees, again, the original title was better for that. That said, there is a lot of information, and there's certain things that I didn't know, like a true cedar tree is not what here in a lot of the United States that we call a cedar tree, and that makes me question a lot. And I'm like, wait, there's like, it's all juniper trees and just some don't have juniper berries? What? Like, it makes me question stuff. Because here in Utah, we have two major trees. They look pretty identical. We were always taught that it was a cedar tree is the one without the berries, and a juniper tree is the one with the juniper berries. And like, juniper trees are really common here, as are cedar trees, which now makes me question, is it actually a cedar tree? It's something that I want to look into further because I do like to know the wildlife and plant life here where I live. And a lot of the trees that she talks about don't exist here in the desert. We kind of have very limited supply of those that actually like survive here well naturally. We have so many like transplanted trees and they require so much water and they do not survive that it's just kind of a bummer that we don't get to see a lot of our native trees here until you get out of the cities, which is getting more and more difficult as more people move here. Another bummer of living here. That all said, the other trees were interesting to learn about, and she gives like random little bits of information, again like the last book, that I don't think most authors are including, and it's good information. For example, I think it was for like the birch tree where you have like the paper kind of thing around the trunk that a lot of people will just take like a little strip but all the way around, and that'll apparently kill a tree. And apparently if you cut limbs for like your wand or whatever, you need to use like a very sharp knife, and like there's certain ways like you have to like harvest like the leaves where like you have to leave like a little bit at the end. Like you don't take it straight from the branch, like you cut it and like you don't have the little stem at the end, because then it can still regrow from that point, but if you cut that off then it doesn't or something. It's stuff like that that it's like I literally never would have known that. I would never have looked up that. I never would have thought of that. And so it's just like random little stuff like that it's just so interesting, and it's one of the reasons I really love this author. I feel like she is one of the very few that actually does a lot of research outside of just magical research, just like the mundane stuff you should know when you get into this stuff. Again, the Essential Oils book, there's a lot of information that wasn't just magical. Same with this book. Honestly, I think these are books that I would personally go out and buy. So far, the two that I've gotten from her have been fantastic. Of course, you never know, sometimes you're gonna find a hit or miss book from an author, but so far I'm really, really loving these. Even though I'm not huge into tree magic, it's still one of those things that like, if I decided to, it would be a good resource. And again, I feel like the new title just doesn't really capture what the book is about, because it really isn't nature, it's really trees. There's like a teeny tiny little smidge, like literally it's, let's see if I can find it, because it's just like one little graph basically on the flowers, and that was it. There was a lot of stuff at the back of the book that was interesting for like spells and rituals and stuff, but like this is your page for flowers. It's just a little diagram and that's it, really. And like it's interesting, don't get me wrong, like it's cool to know about some of the flowers I know, like honeysuckle and like daffodils and daisies and lilacs and marigold and sunflowers. It's interesting. And I think she mentioned that sunflowers normally grow here, not in Europe, which is interesting because a lot of times the information for magic comes from Europe. And so like our growing stuff and their growing stuff are a little bit different because it's different climates, especially like for like the UK area where a lot of Wicca-based things came from because of Joe Gardner. Like we have a lot of different stuff here than there because like we get like a lot more sun in, well, I guess it depends on what state you're in, but like here in Utah, like sunflowers are everywhere. And so it was interesting to note that it's like, well, like you really don't see those as much over there. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense because they like desire all of the sun and they can withstand a lot of heat, where other flowers will wither and die. So anyways, it's just random little things like that that I find super interesting that Lisa Chamberlain does with her books. She always tries to include just random bits of information outside of just the magical stuff, which I think makes it much more well-rounded for a resource to use in your craft. Again, these books are so good. I do think that this should have stayed Tree Magic, not Nature Magic. It is a very misleading title. Like, my husband was super excited about it until he learned it was just trees. And it's like, it's cool, but not what everyone is looking for. So anyways, that is going to be my thoughts on this book. I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. There wasn't a whole lot of other reviews on this. It was mostly just like praise and that was it. So I don't know. There's like, that's one of the things with the witchy books. A lot of times there's not a whole lot of reviews. And a lot of people just do a star rating and leave it and they never actually talk about like why. So it's had good reviews, but yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Huge thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names here on the screen. If you would like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every single day, and until next time, thank you so much for watching and blessed be.